Hello and welcome to my video review of Spider-Man Noir #1, a book that I have been excited about since it was announced and even ended up reading that Spider-Verse issue leading into this, even though I hadn't been reading the Spider-Verse stuff. And it is a book that's written by Marguerite Stahl of the Beautiful Creatures fame and art by my man Juan Ferreira, who I love. And already, just the cover is awesome. I mean, that is a pretty cool cover right there. And you end up getting a little bit of a recap. It's New York City, 1939, in an era of mobsters and monsters. Crime and corruption run rampant through the city streets. For a time, the people were protected by the Spider-Man, a mass vigilante who could climb up walls and swing from webs while brandishing a Colt 45. And I'm not talking the malt liquor, but maybe we are. I like Colt 45 back in the day. Not a huge fan of Old English, which I think tastes like sucking on a piece of charcoal. And then he vanished and was presumed dead because maybe he drank too much Colt 45. But after a Nazi Zeppelin was brought down over Midtown by a pair of wall-crawling interlopers, whispers of his return have begun anew. And that seems to be spelling out what we did see in the whole Spider-Verse book, though this seems disconnected from the get-go. And you do end up starting off with Peter Parker, Midtown Manhattan, private eye, lunch hour. It is raining. It looks like nighttime to me, and I think that it'd be better served for night because of this whole noir deal. But it's kind of cool, and I love the art by Juan Ferreira. I always do. You'll never convince me not to. And I do like the little call out where you have Peter Parker, hard-boiled detective, eating hard-boiled eggs, and you end up with some old-timey radio. And I think that Marguerite Stoll, the big problem here is that she gets really caught up in the old-timey noir language, you know, the way that they talk here, and kind of leaves behind some of the setup, especially for people who aren't familiar with Spider-Man Noir. Pretty much my only background with Spider-Man Noir is from the Shattered Dimensions video game, but the art, again, is cool. You end up having Peter hear some gunshots, realizes that there is a bank robbery on his street and his bank, and he jumps down and starts to wreck house. He swings down, actually. He lands on the top of the car, and again, this art's incredible. You have Juan not really doing a lot of fun, innovative things with the paneling that he does a lot, but you have some of the, things that he does, and he's awesome with the mood and tone, and also with action scenes where you see at the bottom here where you have Peter do a backflip, side flip, looks like Rey Mysterio. Maybe he's doing the 619. If we were in the 616, that'd be even better. But he ends up pretty much shooting out the front of the car, ends up doing all these things. And as the car's going, it looks like it's going to hit this mother and a little girl. He ends up getting his spider sense that looks awesome and blows out the tire, and everybody goes flying into a pole out the car, and you end up having Peter do a triple flip axle, whatever the things are when you're doing the gymnastics. People still like that Nadia Comaneci, and lands, and ends up getting these guys arrested, gets back to his egg, and that's where you do end up having J. Jonah of this world come up and say, hey, you hear about the black cat? She got scratched last night, and that's lingo for she got beat up, and she has the Black Cat Club, and they go off to investigate, and that's where they end up finding this girl, Holly Babson, and that's the big mystery of this first issue. She ends up having a brooch that you end up having Peter investigate, finds out that it is a cicada, and those cicadas are annoying. I hate when those cicadas start chirping and a whistling and things, playing the harmonica, I think they do sometimes to annoy me. And as Peter ends up taking this brooch, which is funny because the police let them in because J. Jonah has contributed to the policeman's ball. I think that the police might want that evidence and should have gotten it already. They have the chalk drawings in the back. I mean, the drawings, but they didn't take the brooch. You don't take the brooch and leave the chalk drawings. And he goes off, and this is where he's going to investigate. But first, he goes off to what seems to be an impromptu uh, birthday party for Aunt May, where you have, the whole in the military MJ come with a cake, and it's probably Aunt May's like 220th birthday. I see Peter here looks a lot like Harry Potter. He looks like Harry Potter with a Macklemore haircut. That's crazy. But as they're going, this leads to the talk of this brooch of Holly that ends up showing that Mary Jane knows her. She's been working this whole idea with the Black Cat Club. Why were they advertising for people to work there when they shouldn't? Also, it was a speakeasy. Keep that on the down low. And through all of this, you end up seeing, and it's the bottom right panel, you end up seeing somebody watching the proceedings that does look like Carmen Sandiego. And so you continue on. Peter goes off, and he ain't taking no cabs. He's just swinging into the library, where this librarian's all over his case, too. He even says, like, librarians really get my spidey sense going. I think that you should worry about more things, like Carmen Sandiego walking by and shoving your shoulder, and that's just fight. That's it. Junior high war is on. He is going and looking through, figures out that this brooch is Byzantine, as he ends up getting attacked, ends up saving the librarian, who then still yells at him because the page of that book is ripped out, even though she knows he wouldn't have done it. And we continue on with the chase, with Peter chasing Carmen Sandiego as she runs out of the library and then disappears, even though she was all in red. You think that in this gray area, you'd be able to see where she was, but it pretty much leads to the next clue. The next thing that's going to go on is Peter sees a poster for the Twilight in Babylon exhibit. It's a Babylonian exhibit, which does tie into the brooch, which is Byzantinian, and he's off, where he ends up not being able to meet the curator of this exhibit because he's stuck in Nazi Germany, it seems, but he does end up meeting this woman who, in a coinky-dink, is Dr. Huma Bergman, where that doesn't sound familiar, but that's Holly Babson, the dead girl with the brooch, and that's her sister, who ended up changing her name because, the German hate when there's Nazis out there causing war. They go off. At one point, I thought they were going to smooch there, but they end up going off to have some coffee in the coffee pot, a diner that really is reminiscent of the Nighthawks famous painting by Hooper, and it's all explained. Like, I don't know how my sister got this brooch. She shouldn't have had it. It's old. We're going to have to figure this out. Why don't you come with me? I'm going to find the curator, all these things, where she's like, this is where this case would lead, overseas. I'm like, no, it should be right where, this Holly was killed. Try to tie some things together first. But Peter's like, no, I'm out of here. He goes off. And when he gets home, they get attacked. You end up having MJ there. She's pretty tough. And the person who starts the attack ends up using a camera as a flashbang type deal. They're all blinded. Juan does a good job with the panels that you're seeing through a blurry lens there, as if you were blinded as well. But you can see MJ pretty much clobber this guy with her attaché case. And then you end up having Peter using his Spider-Man abilities and ends up getting rid of these guys who go off. And, you end up having Mary Jane and Aunt May pretty much plead with Peter, you got to be the Spider's man again, pretty much. And it's funny because he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I had some problems, but he's been Spider-Man all this time. I mean, just because you're not fully in the costume, even though at one point he is, he's like, things are complicated right now. And Aunt May has a pretty good line here and says, I can only remind you of who you are. I can't tell you what to do. No one can. And you do have the with great power line being brought up a couple times in this whole issue, and Peter kind of shoves it aside. Well, he ends up, like everybody probably knew, going off to the White Plains military base so they can get in the Spruce Goose and head overseas to go find this doctor, and it's very Indiana Jones-esque here, especially as we go to the last page, and you get the little dots there as they're flying around, and it's to be continued, obviously. And the big thing about this whole issue is, like I said, there's disjointed scenes. You don't have a good progression from one to the other. You end up having, it seems like Marguerite Stahl has an idea of where she wants the narration to go, but not enough room because she's so concerned with having Peter not want to be Spider-Man, and also with the old-timey, meh, see? The all hard-boiled talk, the old-time radio detective stuff, which I do love, but here I think you'd be better served to get people on board with who Spider-Man Noir is, more of what happened to him to make him not want to be Spider-Man, but also just get him being Spider-Man. You have him doing it, so just have him do it. But they are off flying around to go find the solution to this murder mystery. I'm sure that Carmen Sandiego will be right behind, wondering where in the world they are. I love Juan's art. Just the story didn't hit as much for me as I wished and hoped it would. So by the end of all this, I'm going to give it a 6.5, but I'm hoping that now that we're kind of into this, once we go off here, Marguerite Stahl will relax a little herself and kind of let the story breathe, let it tell a full story and not just what seemed to be scenes crammed into each other to get to the end here. And I hope that you like this video review. This is more along the lines of how I do the podcast and what I do as I go through it. So I hope that this is something that people enjoy. I don't know. I'm desperately trying to figure out how to do all this because I am a maroon, as they say. But if you like this, please subscribe to the channel and then look in the description of any of our videos and you'll have links to all the stuff Weird Science, including our websites for DC, Marvel, our Marvel and DC podcast, our Patreon, our Twitters, all those things, and that'd be great. But thanks everybody, and talk to you later.